Welcome back to another episode of Hodinkee Radio. Today's guest is Tania Edwards, the co-founder of Collectability, the specialist dealer she co-founded with John Reardon in 2019. Tania has been in the watch industry for more than 30 years, mostly focusing on Patek. Her journey started with promoting the 150th anniversary of the brand in 1989, which led to her role as marketing director at the Henry Stern Agency, or Patek Philippe USA, where she stayed for just about 10 years. During this time, she played a pivotal role in Patek's most successful ad campaign, You Never Actually Own a Patek, You Merely Look After It for the Next Generation, while also seeing the brand grow tremendously. After Patek, she made stops at auction houses and brands before co-founding Collectability with Reardon. On today's episode, Tania and I discuss all things Patek Philippe, her history with the brand, its heritage, how it's evolved over the past 30 years, and of course, Cubitus. With that, thanks for joining Hodinkee Radio, Tania.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's a real pleasure.
We had John on about a year ago, but I've known you at least for a couple of years now, and obviously your passion for the brand shines through. So I'm excited to get some of your expertise on Hodinkee Radio for the first time. I want to start with the story of how you became introduced to the brand Patek Philippe way back when.
Yeah, really way back when, and you can't make this up. Probably tell by my accent, even though I've lived in the States for over 30 years. I grew up in England and I went to university in England. And at the time, I had a boyfriend whose father was a Swiss watchmaker. And as was the tradition, during the summer vacations, we'd go backpacking across Europe. And we had to fly into Geneva to start our travels because we had to go to Patek Philippe because I had to understand what the world's finest watchmaker was all about. Now, put this into context. I'm a student at university. Do you think I care about the world's finest watchmaker? Absolutely not. But my friend insisted, and we arrive outside the beautiful Patek Salon on Rue de Rhône. And I said, we cannot go in there. Look at us. We're scruffy students. They'll know we can't afford a watch. And he said, no, this is Patek Philippe. Don't be ridiculous. They'll treat us well. And they did. And my friend asked the lovely sales associate to please explain what does Patek Philippe mean, what is its history, and to show me the current collection. And she did that with grace and charm, as if Princess Diana had walked in and asked to see the collection. And it just blew me away. And I walked out and I said to my friend, one day I will own a Patek Philippe. And he said, yes, you will. And the rest, as they say, was history.
Well, that's right. You much more than own a Patek Philippe. Shortly after that, you came to work with them and then for them. So can you start by talking about, from what I understand, you started working with them around the 150th anniversary campaign, which would have been in 1989. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was another fortuitous moment. I had been sent from the London office to the New York office to learn about international marketing. And the company was pitching Patek Philippe international business to support the 150th anniversary. This was in 1988. And as is often the case when you're pitching a new piece of business, a memo will go around. Does anyone know about this brand? Does anyone want to be involved in it? And I said, yes, I know about it. And I also know how to pronounce it, because nobody was pronouncing it properly at the time, because nobody had heard of Patek Philippe. So this is really the critical point here, that back then, and you'll hear it from me repeatedly during this interview, I'm sure, the knowledge for Patek, awareness for Patek was very, very low. When I started in the business. And so we won the business and we started working on really promoting Patek Philippe for its 150th anniversary, which was, as she rightly said, 1989. And that was a pivotal year for Patek, because they did, under the guidance of Philippe Stern, who was then managing director of Patek Philippe, the goal was to put Patek Philippe on the map.
You mentioned it a little bit, alluded to it, the perception or perhaps lack thereof of the brand at that time.
Well, that's a really important point. So first of all, very few people had heard of Patek Philippe at that time. You had to be a very privileged member of society to own one, as you still do today. They've always been expensive. They've always been exclusive. But at that time, very few people had that privilege. And awareness was completely different. The media market was completely different. We didn't have social media, so there wasn't instant information about everything. Also, let's put it into context. We're talking about the end of the 80s. The mechanical watch world was still reeling from quartz crisis of the 70s. And it was a tough time. It was a tough time if you made mechanical Swiss watches, because the Japanese were making far cheaper watches, and that was still resonating even then, even at the end of the 80s. So Philippe Stern, as I mentioned, felt very strongly that he had to change that. He had to change that perception, and he understood that it had to be marketing led. You had to change people's awareness through publicity. So he had various ideas. The most important one was that he started thinking about this 10 years beforehand. He started thinking about it in 1979, which was when he was made managing director under his father, who was the president, Henri Stern. And he realized that to make a big splash for the 150th anniversary, he had to do something very special. And 1979 was an interesting year. It was when, for example, Etta came out with their Delirium quartz caliber. That's the tiny quartz caliber that was the first important quartz caliber that was going to compete against the Japanese. So here we are, we're still very much in this quartz era. And yet he decided, I'm going to make the world's most complicated timepiece. And that turned out to be the Caliber 89, which was finished in 1989. So it took 9 years of research and development to make that extraordinary timepiece. And he wanted to prove that, yes, quartz technology is seemingly the future. It's cheap. It tells that more accurate time, but mechanical timepieces still matter. And together with a auction to auction off that first Caliber 89, he put together over 300 vintage timepieces. And Habsburg Feldman, the auction house run by Osvaldo Patrizzi, put together the first ever single brand auction, the first themed auction. So this was a Patek Philippe only auction. So that was very revolutionary at the time. And that was really what started it all. And with that came limited edition timepieces as well to celebrate the 150th anniversary. And so it was a package. And he understood that he needed, as I mentioned, marketing. So he brought on an international public relations team. That's how I got involved. And it was a big year. Publicity-wise, it was a very, very big year. We were even on Saturday Night Live.
It's amazing. Some of the stuff that we take for granted now, thematic auctions, limited editions on some level that you just mentioned, even just a reversion to complicated mechanical watchmaking. Like, we take it for granted now, but it was what led sort of it ended up being an inflection point that for Patek Philippe as a brand, if not the whole entire Swiss watch industry, that led to a boom in the 1990s for the brand and Swiss watches more broadly, right?
100%. Because, from that moment, Cartier did a Cartier only auction that was.
Yeah, 96. Yeah.
And so, yes, it was the start of, and it was also the start of making auctions very attractive to people, that you needed to look at what was going on at auctions. Whereas prior to that, it was, mostly pocket watches that were sold at auctions. So here was this Patek theme that had a lot of wristwatches actually in it, as well as pocket watches. So it was a real shift in the relevance of collecting on a much broader scale watches.
Soon after that, you went to work for the Henri Stern Watch Agency, or Patek Philippe USA, and the 1990s were a time of huge strides forward for Patek, as we've been talking about. It was the Philippe Stern era, defined by opening a new museum, a new production facility, a new ad campaign, and that's before we even get to the product. So before we get to some of those specifics, can you just talk about what it was like working at Patek Philippe USA in the 1990s?
It was a very frustrating time, because here we had the most beautiful watches in the world and nobody knew about them. Even though there was a big media blitz in 1989, it was momentary. It didn't carry on into the 90s. And I remember when I first started working there, I'd say to my friends, I've got this new job. I'm working for Patek Philippe. Who? What are they? What do they do? Nobody had heard of Patek. And as the marketing director, I, of course, found that extremely frustrating. It was also, I think it's also important to recognize that at that time, retailers were the real voice piece for Patek Philippe. It wasn't the end public. It was up to the retailers to sell to the public. So they were very critical in educating people about Patek Philippe. It wasn't as it is now, that we'll look on the internet, we'll learn from websites or whatever, wherever we get our information from. Then it was up to the retailer selling directly to the consumer. And it was a tough time for retailers, because to have a good display of Patek Philippe watches, you had to invest in them. They weren't on commission. They were, you had to buy them, you had to own them, and awareness was still very, very low. So they were in that. It was a time of frustration for us as a brand and the retailers. So we needed to change that, and that's where Philippe Stern came in and made really what was the foundation of modern Patek Philippe. So he changed the marketing, and he brought in products that were exactly what the public wanted and what retailers could sell easily. I think those are critical changes that happened at that time.
Well, let's talk about the product first. I think it's funny. It's an era that I think collectors have come to appreciate more in the past few years,
yes,
this whole
definitely.
neo-vintage era, if you will. But
yes.
Can you talk about, maybe from your perspective, what Philippe Stern did at the time to really revive Patek on the product side or on the watch side?
Yeah. So at this time, there was two levels of Patek. There was the time only, which was just under $10,000 for a strap piece, and then there was what we now call brand complications, which would be a perpetual calendar, a chronograph, and they were in the 40,000, 50,000 price range. So you had this huge gap in between, and there just wasn't anything in between. And Philippe Stern came up with the genius idea of introducing a whole new category, which at the time he called small complications or useful complications. And the first one that was launched in 1996 was the annual calendar, 5035. And I remember distinctly when we showed it to retailers for the first time in Basel, they were thrilled, because here was a price point. It was $1,500 for that first annual calendar. They could sell that because they didn't need clients who could jump up so hugely in a price point. And there were the clients that you'd nurtured who had the time only, who wanted to move up, but as I said, couldn't take that big leap. So it was a thrilling new category for the retailers. Now, so that was an important bridge there. And then we came out with 1999, which was the Ladies 24. And for decades, way before I started, Patek in the US was begging Patek in Geneva to come out with a really distinctive ladies timepiece. I mean, at that time, really, it was Cartier that was known as the ladies watchmaker. It wasn't Patek for sure, even though Patek made beautiful ladies watches. And so the 24 did that. It immediately was appreciated as this is the watch. And again, I'm going back to the retailers. We needed them on our side to get it going. And I can remember that Basel, 4 women in Patek were given a 24, and I was privileged to be one of them. And every time I left the Patek booth at Basel, I literally would be attacked by people. Show me your watch, show me your watch, show me your watch. Because it was so thrilling to see this beautiful Patek. It was a stainless steel watch. So it was a bracelet watch with diamonds, and it was under $10,000. And I think it was $7,900. It was artificially priced to help gain awareness for it, and it worked. And of course, that was all coupled with a new ad campaign. So it was, in that respect, very exciting. But I've missed one other important watch in between that, because of course I had to talk about that 24 because I loved that so much. But there was a very important watch in between the annual calendar and the 24, and that was the Aquanaut, which was a cousin of the Nautilus. And it was another example of Patek coming in with a sports watch that was to try and attract a younger intro level person to the brand. And Again, it was priced very fairly under $10,000. Still a huge amount of money, but at that time it was a great price. I think what they go for now. It succeeded and it didn't succeed. It succeeded because it was immediately a huge success, but it didn't succeed because the people that it was meant for, i.e. first-time buyers into Patek, attracting that younger audience, didn't stand a chance because it was bought by existing Patek Philippe owners who loved it and wanted that weekend sporty watch. So it exceeded at every level. Let's put it that way.
Some things don't change, and we're going to get into a little bit more new collection releases from Patek, obviously with the Cubitus. But you mentioned there the new marketing campaign that had to come with this sort of product revival, because as you said, in the beginning of the 1990s, there was still somewhat of a lack of awareness. So can you talk a little bit about the new ad campaign that you all worked on in the 90s and what became perhaps the most legendary tagline in all of watches, if I may say?
I mentioned how frustrating it was to be the marketing director of a brand that nobody'd heard of. I mean, it used to drive me insane. And the advertising that we had at that time was started in 1985, and it featured the Calatrava 3919, which is the hobnail design Calatrava, and it had two hands presenting it like this, and with copy, lots of copy. And I just felt it was very old-fashioned. I felt it wasn't working anymore. And every time I saw Philippe Stern, and I just want to reiterate that this is the 90s, this is when we worked very closely with him. It was a much smaller company. You had immediate access to him. It was a great privilege. And I kept complaining about the advertising. And one day he got so fed up. He said, "Oh, right, Mrs. Edwards," as he called me, "if you think you can do better, go and do it." So I said, "Thank you very much, I will." So being British, I felt strongly that the British ad industry had a really good grasp on an international campaign, because we had to be international. We had to have a message that transcended every culture in the world, because that Patek was sold all over the world. And to do that, you had to have somebody who really understood that. So it's not going to be the Swiss, because the Swiss think about Switzerland and that's it. Unfortunately, it couldn't be the Americans, because the Americans have this massive country that it can think about. So we went off to London, and to cut a long story short, we were presented this campaign by Ligas Delaney, who to this day are still producing Patek Philippe's advertising. And what they did was the reason that they won the business is because they really dived into why is it that somebody will buy a Patek Philippe? What differentiates it from any other watch? And they quickly understood that it's a very personal experience buying, owning a Patek, and it becomes such an intrinsic part of somebody for many reasons. One, it's normally bought, Pateks are often bought as a celebration. I was made CEO, I was made a partner in my law firm, birth of a child, a marriage. So they always have significant reasons why somebody bought a Patek. And then that was passed on, because with it came that emotion of owning it. And, whoever was lucky enough to inherit a Patek had the memories of that person who wore it beforehand. So they caught on to that, because they did research all over the world, and everybody said the same thing. This is the most precious thing I own. I'm going to pass it on to my daughter, my son, whoever. And that's where the tagline came from. You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You started off with look after it for the next generation. And we might talk about this. I changed it to take care of it for the next generation, because that's how important the watches were. And that line also, it's brilliant, because it tells you this must be a quality product. It's going to last for generations. So that said everything in one go. There was the emotion of owning one, and there was the quality of owning one. So I think that's why it was such a brilliant line.
You mentioned the two slight distinctions in the ad. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's funny because this was 28 years ago that we did this campaign, and for the US, which was where I was at the time head of, I preferred the phrase, "You never actually own a Patek, you merely take care of it." for the next generation, because I thought take care had more meaning than look after. You have to care for it, you have to be careful. So that's why that tagline was used in the US and not anywhere else in the world. And then, as we all saw recently, the world saw the American tagline for the first time and found it confusing. So
they thought it was fake. Some people thought it was fake, huh?
It just makes me laugh so much because that was an awful long time ago when that decision was made, and I think it's rather ironic and funny that it's got to light now, so long after.
We've talked about a few of these threads that came together in the 1990s, the product development and these simple complications, small complications, as you called it, the marketing campaign. We could talk about consolidating production facilities, the museum, even the Patek magazine, which I know was an initiative of yours. But can you just talk about how these all came together in the 1990s and how you saw the perception of the brand sort of start to change or evolve?
Well, I think the key thing is that Philippe Stern, even though he wasn't quite president of the company then, his father absolutely was delighted to let him drive the company. And consolidating all the workshops was really the first huge project that he did, because at that time there were at least 13 workshops around Geneva, and it was tough because you'd finished part of a movement, then that had to go somewhere else down the road to another workshop, and so consolidating them was a huge deal. I mean, that was the start of changing the industry as a whole. I mean, now in that area of Plan Le Watt, there are lots of other manufacturers, including Rolex. But at the time, and I remember going to visit the site with Philippe Stern before anything had happened. So we needed to go there because he needed a big enough site, and the concrete had been laid upon which the building would have been built. And I can remember standing on that concrete with him in fields, looked like fields at the time. Doesn't look like that now. And he's saying, this is where I'm going to build the future of Patek Philippe. I mean, it still to this day gives me goosebumps, but he had such foresight and realized that was the way to really, preserve the company for the future, was to bring everything together. And then also concurrently at the same time, because it meant that one of the workshops, and in this instance, Atelier Réuni, where the cases were made, became empty. He had a very big building that was empty, and he could quickly fill it by turning it into his own museum for Patek Philippe watches. So it sort of was like this perfect storm of everything happening at once. And he was controlling it all, and everything had his personal touch on it. So the museum was a dream come true. Bringing all the workshops together was a dream come true. Bringing in new timepieces that served a wider audience was a dream come true. He was making things happen. And as I said, that was the creation of the foundation of how we see Patek Philippe today.
When did you, before we start to talk about sort of everything since then, when did you leave Patek to pursue new career opportunities?
2004.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a while, yeah.
So I wanted to fast forward a little bit, and maybe you can talk, from an insider perspective to observing the brand still in the industry, but how you've seen Patek evolve since the 1990s. We're talking about, through the 2000s and 2010s. What you've seen and observed, how the brand has evolved through transitions in leadership, throughout the family, and what you've seen in that area.
Well, I mean, the way it's evolved has been exponential. I really don't think that at the time I was working there in the 90s, if anyone could have predicted the growth of Patek Philippe, even Philippe Stern, who, let's face it, was doing everything to propel its growth. So I think that's the biggest difference. It's not the same company, but it's a different time. I mean, now it's not the retailers that are driving the business. It's the customers that are driving the business. And that's a big shift, a very big shift. And yet, with all these new facilities, Patek has continued to do what it's always done, which is innovate. So things like advanced research, that came in 2005. Extraordinary advances. You think, okay, you've invented everything. Yes, you're going to continue to improve the way you make something, but to come out with completely new innovations that change the world of horology is mind-blowing. So it's evolving and continuing to do what it has always done, which is innovate, be a leader, and master perfection as best it can. So I've seen it. In other words, I'm saying it's more of the same. It's just much, much bigger.
You mentioned it a couple of times now, the difference between being basically a retailer-driven company or a company that serves its retailers across the world versus one that is able to connect more directly with its customers or clients. Can you just talk from your perspective what you think the sort of implications of that are for the brand and everything around it?
I think it's a change that every single company in the world, irrelevant of what product they're making, has had to change with. And ultimately, it's social media. That the world is now one place, one marketplace, and everything is available immediately. And our knowledge comes from immediate information. We don't have to wait for the publication of a magazine to come out to see, I'm going to say something a bit ironic, to see a new ad campaign or see a new product launch. We can see it on our phone straight away. And so people are much better informed than ever before. And there is so much information that it's just changed the landscape of how we make decisions, how we purchase. We don't just have to go to one particular retailer in our town to buy something. We can buy from the world now. And we can buy in different, not just brick and mortar stores. We can buy online. We can buy. So that whole process of purchasing as well as information has changed. That's the biggest difference. And that's what shifted from the retailer to the client.
You hinted at it there a little bit. Social media has obviously been a buzz with one thing in the world of Patek over the past few weeks now, and that's the Cubitus. I'm going to ask you specifically about your thoughts on the watch here in a second. But before we get to that, I'm wondering, as someone who worked at the brand and has been quite familiar with the brand for 30 or 35 years at this point, if there's anything you could say to sort of situate it in the historical context of the brand that people might not have fully thought of, that you might have special POV on.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I'm glad you put it into the context of the history of the brand, because I think that's really important. It's very unusual for Patek to come out with a completely new series. And as we all know, it's been 25 years since the last time it did that, which was the 24 in 1999. And so it's not a decision that's made lightly for Patek Philippe. It's something that they spend many, many years designing and researching, and to make a new case, to make a new bracelet, to whatever it is, let alone a new movement. And we saw, of course, the Cubitus does have a new movement with the 5822P with a instantaneous grand date. But that's many, many years ago, they decided to do that. And I think that that's the important thing, to put it into context. It's not something that suddenly appeared because there was a trend for a certain look at the moment. And if we look back at history, whenever these new pieces came out, we can start really, I guess, in 1932 with the reference to 96, the Calatrava, that we know so well, i.e. a round watch. I mean, at the time, watches were new, wristwatches were new, and it might seem very obvious to us to have a round watch, but at the time it wasn't. And so that was the start. And then in 1968, there was the Ellipse, the elliptical shape watch, which at the time was totally revolutionary. I mean, here is a completely different shape watch, but still in the collection. And then in 1976, the watch that everybody knows about, the Nautilus, came out. And that was not as well received as it is today. It was a shock for a lot of people. This isn't a Patek. What are they thinking? Why did they come up with this really chunky, steel sports watch. That's not what Patek Philippe is all about. And there's been that, and then we get into the 90s and the 24 and the Neptune, which got a little bit hidden, I think, with other things happening in the year it came out, such as the annual calendar. But they're very slow to do something new like that. So I think that's important to recognize when looking at a new watch.
You were around in the 1990s and saw the release of a few collections that we've talked about. You talked about the success of the 24, the Aquanaut, the Neptune, not so successful, I suppose, given that they don't have it now. But anything around those releases that you remember, and if so, how it compares to the initial reaction we've seen on the Cubitus over the past few weeks now?
That's a really good question. So again, I'm just going to hark back to the fact that in the 90s, it was still the retailers that mattered. It was their opinion that mattered. And the challenge with selling to retailers was getting them to accept a new watch that they're going to have to put into their watch cases. It's going to cost them money. Will it sell or not? Nobody knew. And so for them to see a timepiece that they knew they could sell, that was a big sea change, because there was, we weren't having to keep pushing and saying, I promise you this is going to do great. You don't have to worry. They knew it would sell. And so that was an immediately positive reaction, which was so exciting. And, we just, it was a different media marketplace. The general public could not weigh in. There wasn't a way for the general public to weigh in, because they couldn't comment until they saw it in a store. And that's a lag, that's a lead time. Now everything is immediate. So
well, to be clear, people comment on it without having seen it in the store, right?
Well, exactly. And I have to just say, what if you and I'm sure you're going to ask me what's my personal opinion, and I'm going to give you a very honest answer here, Tony. I haven't seen it in real life. And I cannot comment on a Patek Philippe that I have not seen in real life, because holding it, feeling it, looking at it, understanding it is a completely different thing to looking at a picture of something. And that's fundamental to everything that we do at Collectability. Is you've got to hold the watch and look at it and understand it before truly giving a comment on something. So that's my personal opinion, but that's because I work in the industry and I have to see it first.
It's fair enough, but I have to press you on giving some sort of opinion on the watch. Perhaps not the watch itself or what it looks like in person, but just the release of the Cubitus and seeing it as a square take on the Nautilus and releasing it in steel, two-tone, and then the new complicated version, as you mentioned. What are your thoughts, sort of just generally speaking, on the release of the Cubitus collection?
Generally speaking, I think it's exciting. I think it's always exciting if Patek does something new. And whether the response is good, bad, or ugly, it's a conversation, isn't it? People are talking about it. And so, nobody can deny it's caused a huge amount of conversation. And that's great. And whether or not we think it was inspired by the Nautilus, and I can totally understand why people would think that. Of course, I can understand that. Because I know how Patek works and how it will introduce a new piece. I know for them, they weren't thinking that. They were thinking differently at the time, to design a square watch. And then they've got this huge history and DNA to look back at. What do people, what's worked? What do people like? How can we incorporate aspects of a watch into something? But I wasn't involved with the design of that watch, so I can't comment on it truly. But
I think
I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. Let me put it that way. I can't wait to see it.
One of the primary criticisms that I think we are seeing is that it's expected, if not lazy, because the bracelet is basically from the Nautilus, more or less. The dial is something we are quite familiar with. The movement, except for the big date version, is something that's been in the catalog for a little bit. I'm wondering what you make of those criticisms.
I think that it's easy to summarize what you think about something, and I can totally understand why people would make those comments, but again, I think I have to put it into a historical context. I mean, whenever not all new watches, but certainly some new watches, like the Nautilus itself when it first came out, was just not appreciated, not accepted. The Neptune, which we sort of skipped over, was another very good example of a watch that people looked at and said, "What is this? It's not a Nautilus, but it's meant to be a sports watch, and it's not this, and it looks like someone else's watch. It doesn't look like Patek's watch." And it takes time to accept change. It takes time to absorb change, and we're all human. And it's something that we do instantly, is give our opinion on something.
Okay, I want to get into talking a little bit about collectability, more of the vintage market, which you all obviously focus on quite a bit. But before that, I wrote down a few rapid fire questions because I just want to get a little bit of a flavor for sort of your favorite Patek references, if that's okay with you. Okay, let's start with this. Okay. Favorite Calatrava reference?
I'm going to say a 4860, which is the ladies' Calatrava, and I'm saying that because it was the first Patek Philippe that I ever bought. And it's a little round Calatrava with a white dial and black Breguet numerals. It is the classic officer's type watch. And I bought it because when I first told you that story, when I was a teenager and I went into the Rue de Rhône Salon in Geneva and looked at Patek for the first time, it was a design I saw then that I just loved. Its simplicity. So that's why.
I'm Googling it now because I wasn't familiar with it, but it's like the 26 millimeter version of, there's a larger, more like 34 or 35 millimeter version as well.
Yes,
is that right?
Yes. And also the Officers 3 reference 3960, which came out in 1989. That's the men's version of it, which I just loved. So for me, I wasn't able to get the limited edition, but I was able to get the ladies.
Okay, favorite chronograph reference?
So again, I'm a vintage girl, so I'm going to say the 130, which was Patek Philippe's first chronograph that was in general production. And it started making them in 1934, which is very early for a series, a watch produced in series. And here was a complicated watch produced in series. And it was made with the Valjoux caliber 13 movement that Patek itself then modified for its own watch. But that's the iconic movement that's in a 1518 or 2499. So I just love the history of that, and I love the design and its size. It's perfect for a woman to wear. It's just a simple beauty.
Okay, favorite calendar reference?
I'm going to say 3940, and that is for the simple reason. When I first met Philippe Stern in 1989, he was wearing a 3940. And that was a watch he mostly wore, actually. And I remember thinking, what an elegant man wearing what an elegant watch. And it just stuck in my head as being the perfect watch. And that's a simple answer.
Do you have a particular metal series, anything like that, or any 3940?
I would like it in rose gold myself. But, you know, it's like chasing a snowball down a very steep hill, getting 3940, because they keep going up, and I can't afford one. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's that.
Okay, moving up a little bit. Favorite grand complication?
You know, I'd like to say my favorite grand complication is the Calibrating 9, because that was. Can you imagine being in your 20s, in your early 20s, and that your introduction to Patek Philippe is the Calibrating 9? That's what you have to understand in watchmaking. I mean, that it was mind blowing, and I learned a lot from just understanding what the Calibre 89 was all about. But I would say that in terms of a watch to wear, that would be my absolute dream. It's very easy. A minute repeater.
Any minute repeater will do.
Any minute repeater will do. But when the 7000 came out, which is the ladies' first minute repeater in rose gold, that melted my heart. And that would be my dream grand complication. A perfect, simple watch.
Okay, I think I've caught a glimpse of it, but what Patek is on
Because
your
I'm
what's on
waving
your
my
wrist
hands
today?
around.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. What's on the
yeah,
wrist today?
I'm wearing a 3848 ellipse. And what's interesting about this particular ellipse is its bracelet, which was made by Kepler and Kearns, who are a jeweler in Zurich. And they made the bracelet for this watch. Obviously, it was originally on a strap. I still have the strap, the original strap that came with it. But I just love this bracelet. I think it's really funky.
Yeah, it's beautiful. For those listening, it's kind of a bangle style
It's like
bracelet,
a
I would
bangle
say.
style. Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Great in the summer when it's hot.
Hey, it might be time to change it back to the strap then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But I just love it. So John Reardon, the founder of Collectability, and myself, we are passionately in love with ellipses. So you'll usually find one of us wearing an ellipse. But I'm wearing another watch as well. Actually, this is a watch. This is a pendant watch, which I know you can't see because it's too far away. But if I turn it over, it's got a little dial there.
So for those listening, it's Tanya's necklace, and on the back side, it's a Patek pendant watch.
And it was made in 1912, and
Wow.
which was the end of the art. Not it's just before Art Deco, but Art Nouveau period, and it is made out of platinum and blue enamel,
Wow.
and it's called guirlande. Is the style of it, because it's got a lattice work of design which is made out of tiny little strips of platinum with diamonds inset into it, and that overlays a blue enamel guilloche case cover. It's absolutely exquisite. And
Wow.
If anyone who's visited the Patek Philippe Museum may remember that there is a whole case of guirlande style pendant watches, because Philippe Stern absolutely loves them, and he's collected quite a few beautiful pieces. So whenever we see one, it's a special treat for us. So I had to wear this.
That's beautiful.
Thank
Hey,
you.
we appreciate it. 2 watches.
Two.
Sounds like someone knew she was coming on Hodinkee Radio today, so we appreciate it.
Exactly.
You mentioned your love for the ellipse, both of you at Collectability.
Yes,
Can you
absolutely.
explain that a little bit more for those who maybe don't appreciate the ellipse? Talk a little bit more about why it's so enticing for you all.
I think it's two reasons. One, it's a unique shape for a watch. It's the elliptical shape, which is based on the golden circle, which is a really a perfect shape for us as human beings. It's a face. It's where the eyes cut a face, and it's where if you look at a branch, wherever a bud or is placed along a branch is this perfect 1 to 1.6, which is what an ellipse is. And so it's very aesthetically pleasing for us to look at an ellipse-shaped watch. And then the blue gold dial is something that really distinguishes an ellipse. And Patek patented that ability to literally make blued gold. And what it is it's cobalt that is basically blasted onto the gold, and it becomes blue gold.
You're talking about the dial, the blue dial.
I'm talking about the blue dial.
Yeah.
And it just shimmers and has this most hypnotic look. So, I mean, I can spend hours just looking at my watch, but that's me. I like looking at beautiful things.
Surely that's everyone who's listening to a watch podcast.
I would think so too. Yes.
When we were going through some of your favorite references, something that stuck out was you mentioned a few ladies' references: the 4860, the 7000. I wonder if you could.
Yep.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about collecting vintage Patek, or collecting ladies' watches in particular. What just unpacking that area of Patek and Patek references a little bit more for people who are more interested in smaller watches, may they be a man or a woman, since this is so hot right now. Just something that people could understand about this segment of the Patek catalog and the Patek back catalog that they may not.
Well, I think you heard me say earlier on that the 24 was so important because it at last was a signature ladies' timepiece for Patek Philippe that everybody felt the brand was missing. But Patek has always made ladies' watches. It's made ladies' watches from the very beginning. In fact, the first known Swiss wristwatch was made for a lady. And so it's always been in their catalogue. They love decorating, so that be that in enameling or diamond or adding precious jewels or any kind of decoration. So the ladies' watches gave them an opportunity to really excel and show their skills in decoration. And so they've always made ladies' watches, and there is a huge catalogue of ladies' watches in the vintage market. We don't see them come up for sale often enough because there isn't the demand for them. But I think that once that starts to change, we'll see more and more coming onto the market. And ladies' Patek Philippe watches offer real value for money. I mean, look at this exquisite necklace that I'm wearing, pendant timepiece. It truly is a piece of jewelry, but it also happens to be a Patek Philippe. And but you don't have to wear a necklace to wear a beautiful ladies' watch, Patek. And I think there's enormous untapped opportunity for ladies' Patek Philippe's. They've made so many different designs. And one of my favorite eras for Patek Philippe ladies' watches is the Gilbert Albert era, which is from the late 50s, mid 50s into the early 60s, where he just turned watch design upside down. And some of the funkiest, coolest things ever created were created by him for Patek Philippe in terms of really unusual looking watches and exquisitely decorated pieces of jewelry. And I think that now that women are becoming really interested in fine timepieces, mechanical timepieces, we'll see demand start to change. We're also seeing it, because you alluded to it just yourself then, is this interest at last for smaller watches. So, and I say at last because we don't need to wear a huge watch. Watches are themselves beautifully balanced pieces. So, and we've seen celebrities such as Bad Bunny wear ladies' Patek Philippe watches from the 1990s. I can't tell you how thrilled and excited I was when I saw him wearing a couple. Timothy Chalamet wearing a ladies' Cartier. There isn't a men's and a ladies anymore. Everything is unisex. This is a man's watch. I have a lot of men's watches. And so for me, it's not whether something is a man's or a lady's watch, but I love the very pretty, delicate ladies' watches. And they are true. You're going to get into collecting vintage watches. It's a value proposition to buy these timepieces because they're undervalued at the moment.
This episode will be running right before the Geneva auction season, actually. So I'm curious, to the extent you've had a chance to flip through the catalogs at the larger and even some of the more smaller mid-size auction houses, anything in particular you're excited about coming up from the world of Patek Philippe?
Well, we're very privileged in that we will be bidding on some exceptional timepieces for clients from around the world. But for what we are always looking for is the same old thing, is ellipses and pocket watches. That's the other thing we love at Collectability, is pocket watches. So for us, if we see a pocket watch, we can't resist it, and we have to look at it, and especially if it's special or unusual, then it's got our name on it. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting time. We'll all be watching the 3970s, the perpetual chronographs, to see what happens, because as many of you know, and many of your listeners know, just recently in Hong Kong, one sold for over $400,000, a second series white gold version. So, that's a sea change. That's a shift. And it'll be interesting to see if that continues in Geneva. There are some 3970s for sale, so we'll see. And it's always a benchmark. It's always a very good measurement of the market to see what's happening in Geneva. We call it the World Cup of watch auctions.
You mentioned the 3940 a minute ago, sort of the market for that being like trying to catch a snowball rolling downhill, the market for the 3970 as well. Can you just talk a little bit more about those two markets in general, sort of that neo vintage complicated era, like what we're seeing there and whether you think it's sustainable and all of that?
I definitely think it's sustainable, and I think it's a reaction to the fact that a complicated Patek Philippe today, a modern complicated Patek Philippe, can be upwards of $100,000. That's an eye-watering amount of money, and these are exceptional complications that can be bought for often half that amount, half the amount of a modern complication. And so I think that people are really appreciating that. And then that coupled with the fact that people, they're not put off by a smaller watch now. They can understand that that looks okay. You don't need a 40 millimeter plus watch to be wearing a watch. And so I think that shift has helped, along with understanding a much better understanding of how incredible these timepieces are, that they're still very relevant as important mechanical timepieces.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed that the rose gold 3940 comes your way someday soon.
Thank you. You're very Finally, sweet to say that.
Before I let you go, Tania, anything else in the world of collectability that the people should look forward to? I'll give a plug because you'll probably be too humble to do it on your own. But you and John do an excellent job with the Collectability podcast. I'd say it publishes about monthly, though it's been on a bit of a hiatus for the past couple of months. So I'm crossing my fingers that it'll come back soon. But what else is cooking?
Well, I just on that, yes, we've had a bit of a hiatus, but I can assure you that there are podcasts in the can, as they say, technically, and they will be coming out shortly, and we're really excited for one of them in particular. So there is stuff coming, but thank you for that kind compliment there, Tony. Listen, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're Patek only, and we're an online business, and we're particularly proud that we're only 5 years old, but we won the Watch Pro Vintage and Pre-Owned Watch Retailer of the Year. Ta-da! So we felt very proud to compete against the big boys there with just one brand. So what we are always constantly doing is how can we improve, how can we find better watches, how can we give better information. And because of that, to do that, John and I are constantly learning every day and improving our own knowledge and sharing our own knowledge. But we hope to have some fun with retailers, and maybe we're planning to do some pop-ups. So you'll see Collectability in stores, and we are doing more shows. So we will be at Miami in January, and then later in the year we will be at the Las Vegas Antique Fair. And even though as I said, we're remaining an online business, but we love meeting people and being out in the real world. So hopefully we'll do more of that.
Well, as you say as well, one of the only ways to truly appreciate a Patek or any watch is to see them in person. So appreciate 100%. That you'll be doing more of that in the next year.
100%.
Well, Tania, with that, thank you so much for taking the time. Of course, follow Collectability online on all of their social media channels. And I want to say thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks to Vic Audimanelli for editing, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Hodinkee Radio.